And it's like this thing we're searching for, ostensibly, is outside of us. It's a destination. It's a want. And what I do with my clients and what we really work on in terms of connecting this piece of self-love and then bringing it to the deeper place of sensual and sexual self-love is really about acceptance. It starts with that acceptance of, here we are, this is where I am, this is where my body's at. Am I going to start hooking myself with this notion of how it used to be, those pants I used to fit into, those outfits I used to wear, that confidence I used to have, those runs I used to go on, those blah, 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 these things that we hold on to that, like I say, hook us, and we have this emotional attachment to it. And what I feel is once we can identify that and say, wow, I do have an emotional attachment to my scale, and that, I feel better in my day if I weigh myself and the number is better or whatever. We have these ties. And if we can start to become aware of them and identify them, then we can say, accept.
This is the Entrepology Podcast, the podcast where we optimize the bodies, brains, and lifestyles of entrepreneurs, go-getters, and world-changing innovators.
Welcome to the Entrepology Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker. As a naturopathic doctor and anthropologist, I optimize the health and performance of badass women working to change the world as entrepreneurs and go-getters. People exactly like you. Your business, body balance, and inner badass. These are the themes we are exploring. All right, so we've got a little bit of body and we've got a little bit of badass that we are talking about today. My guest on the show today is a very dear friend of mine, Jen Oliver. Now, I have known Jen for over 25 years. We played basketball together when we were in high school, and now I have the pleasure of working with Jen on almost a daily basis, as she is now our director of coaching under our Entrepology umbrella. But in addition to working with us as part of our team, Jen has her own amazing gig going on. She is the host of the FitMama Podcast, and she is the curator and leader of the FitMama movement. And while Jen started her career talking about fitness and core health, she is transitioning it as we transition as mothers and as women. And a significant portion of her conversation right now is about pleasure and self-pleasure and self-worth and embracing those elements of who we are as women. This was such a fun and such an enlightening conversation. I promise you are going to be challenged. You are going to be uplifted. You are going to be deeply curious. And more than anything, you are going to be inspired and entertained. It is truly my pleasure to introduce you to my dear friend, Jen Oliver. Jen Oliver, welcome back to the Entrepology Podcast.
Thank you, Meg. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's been a few hundred episodes since we've chatted in this context. But I get to talk to you every week. You are now our director of coaching here at Entrepology Labs. But in addition to that, you are up to some really incredible work on your own. You've had some really profound evolutions in your own business. I think since we spoke to you last, you've moved down to the desert and your own oasis down there. Take everyone through some of the personal and professional transformations that you've really walked through in the last 18 months. And then we've got a pretty exciting episode on the backside of that.
Thank you. Yes, it has been a wild ride. It's now been a full 12 months. We literally just celebrated this month our 1-year anniversary being down here in Palm Desert, California. a dream of ours since we started coming down here to visit family and friends. It was kind of like our snowbird destination. My parents had rented a house here for a couple of winters, and it was just such a great place. I remember back when I was having babies, we'd come down here, and it was literally palm trees and mountains and hot all the time. And those are really three of my favorite things. So I decided, along with my husband, that this was a goal of ours. When we came down to California, actually, the first time, probably 12 years ago, we knew we wanted to move here. And, I know you've been to California, and anyone who's been here, it's really quite an oasis. We really love it. So we moved down here after retiring my husband from his job as a basketball coach in the Canadian Inter-University Sports League, which is so interesting now, how everything has really changed in Canadian sports and university sports. And we're down here running our businesses. He started a podcast called the Basketball Podcast. I run the FitMama Podcast and run all my FitMama programming from down here. And we both run these great Canadian businesses from Palm Desert online. So it's kind of worked out really, really, really well. We have our 2 young daughters with us, and we've just been enjoying the fun of living abroad. Even in a pandemic, believe it or not.
Well, and living abroad is like not new for you because you guys picked up when your kids were young, like 2 and 4, right? And just traveled around the world?
Yes. And I still look back on our Instagram handle, the Oliver's Travel. And we still post a little bit to that, but we haven't been traveling obviously lately. But we had such a good travel. When they were 2 and 4, we picked up, my husband took a sabbatical, and we just lived in I think it was 17 different countries over the course of 6 months. And we had a great time away. Our kids just loved basically playing with pillowcases and in the pool of the hotel. And we traveled. We went to all the beaches that we wanted to. And my husband experienced a great opportunity to travel and experience basketball practices all over the world. So he went to about 50 practices in that time. And it was a great research opportunity for not only myself. I was researching my book at the time. Internationally, I was looking at how people were approaching birth, prenatal, pelvic floor, rehabilitation for the core, and all that stuff. So it was really perfect timing for both of us, as we had launched our businesses about a year and a half before that, and then kind of picked up and lived the laptop lifestyle, and we became digital nomads back in 2015. So that was fun, for sure. That set us up for this, and to just really have the courage to be like, okay, we're selling our house in Canada. We're leaving. We're just going to become, Canadians living abroad, really. I mean, we were very, very fortunate. My husband's a basketball coach, as I mentioned, and he was able to get a visa here through a basketball coaching camp company. So he would coach camps all over the United States. So that was one of the pieces that enabled us to be able to move here legally, which was great.
It's so exciting. And your sense of adventure, every time we sit down, I'm like, this is so inspiring. And that sense of adventure and this propensity to lean into change and see where life takes you, but really to like hold on to it and delve into it deeply is, I think, part of what punctuates this shift and change in your own focus of coaching and in your own business. And I'd love for you to share with people a little bit, the FitMama and what that's all about, and now where you are evolving to in terms of your coaching and your educating.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. It has been an evolution. And, thank you for acknowledging that. And it's interesting how we evolve in our businesses and in terms of what we teach. And often, I'm sure we've all heard the old adage, we teach what we need to learn. And it's so interesting how I know myself, back when I was a new mom and I was pregnant and postpartum, I was really, really just a voracious learner about the pelvic floor. You were a huge influence on that. And I know we connected on that back in those days because it was something that wasn't talked about. And when I was in the fitness industry, it was something that not a lot of people knew about, including myself as a personal trainer, when it came to core rehabilitation, taking care of our deep inner core, our pelvic floor, how doing Kegels, incorrectly or correctly could both benefit us and maybe hinder us, and just kind of busting some of the myths. That's really what FitMama became. I started to talk about the work into your workout, because I found that in the fitness industry, we were very, and I say we as in I was in it deep, and we were very hung up on around sort of the basics around food and fitness. And it was very much focused on these two pieces. And while I went to school for decades learning about all the pieces involved, from anatomy, physiology, kinesiology to nutrition and all the things with regarding training and the mind and body. I mean, I had a really deep interest in psychology, and all of these played a role in FitMama. And I realized very early on, working with moms and being a mom myself, the old no pain, no gain mentality that was my athletic background just really didn't have a place in that postpartum or prenatal time period. And I was always someone who was very nurturing, very positive, encouraging. I look back and I think of some of those trainers who, I don't know any names off the top of my head, but who yell and who scream and who belittle you into doing enough push-ups to make you puke or whatever. That really, that I did that in my varsity basketball days. I remember numerous times puking, and I'm just not into that anymore. I just don't see the value of that anymore. And truly, it's actually a harm around those times of pregnancy, postpartum, and when we're having back-to-back children and all the demands on us mentally, emotionally, physically. So I really wanted to get deep into that. And that's why I started the podcast, the FitMama Podcast, because I found that there was a ton of information all about food, all about fitness, all about nutrition, all about, what to do at the gym. And yet I found it wasn't a matter of not knowing what to do. And sometimes it was. When it came to pelvic floor and rehab, I've now connected with so many amazing trainers and pelvic floor physiotherapists and knowledgeable people who are really spreading the love of the pelvic floor and the nurturing and this very safe core fitness approach, which I feel like I was pioneering back in 2014. And now I really have found that I've evolved with the clients I work with in the way that they are wanting to go deeper too. It's not about them having to push themselves to go to the gym anymore or, wake up in the morning and do these things that they hate. It's really about figuring out how they can show more love to their bodies and show more respect and appreciation to these beautiful bodies that they have created through having children or through living their life. And, it's not about counting calories and fitting into these skinny jeans and putting all your worth of your life and yourself and your body and your, all those things into that. So that really became a passion of mine because I felt that there was maybe a lack of information, but not enough talked about around the area of embracing our bodies and where we are on our motherhood journeys. So with that, I started to go deeper in terms of self-love because I actually found that, people were really into the idea of self-love. It was like, okay, yeah, I can back that. Like, I want to love myself, and I'm sure you hear this all the time with your patients and with your clients. And it's like people put themselves down, right? We all want to be our own worst enemy. And have you found that ever to work?
Yeah, exactly. No.
Right? No. It just sets us up for feeling depressed or anxious or frustrated or whatever it is. And so I found that the best way to approach self-love with my clients, because I've found through fitness and this focus on food and really micromanaging these details, which I found to be really a gateway maybe, but not the end result, I found going deeper into the pelvic floor, going deeper into our own pelvis and our own connection, what I call core connection with ourselves. And when we can start to understand our own anatomy, like a lot of women, including myself, I had 2 children before I took a mirror down there and checked the scene out of what my vagina, what my vulva looked like. I was just telling my husband the other day, I'm like, why don't we have pictures of this before? And it was like, I never would have taken a picture before.
It's amazing. As you were describing this, and we're going there, we're talking about self-pleasure, we're talking about self-love in a totally literal context. The thing that struck me when you were talking about the evolution of your clients is I kind of feel like there's this bifurcation that can happen after you have children. And I don't mean physically, I mean mental, emotionally, where when you let yourself like really develop and feel and fall into and lean into motherhood, I think there's this other thing that happens. And when you just listen to your body and you listen to your responses, is you find this confidence because we're doing this thing that like inherently our cells are like, we're pre-programmed to be able to do this. And when you just lean into it, you have this capacity to really find this confidence. And I find that, in that postpartum world, and I don't mean immediately postpartum, I mean like once you've crossed kids, you pass a certain threshold. There's also this group of people who don't find that confidence. And I find it's when we're still listening to that external voice, you've got to look this way, you've got to be this way, or your hair needs to look this way, you have to dress your kids this way. Like when we get caught up in not listening to the internal, but we listen to that external voice, we walk down a different road of that bifurcation. So no, I'm not talking about your abs. I'm literally talking about your confidence. So as you were talking and as you're describing this and this cohort of individuals, and we were chatting before we even got into the podcast about this idea of confidence, it's amazing how when we surrender to the experience of motherhood, how we have this ability and opportunity to access it. And then as you started to talk about, going downtown and checking it out and taking a picture and like understanding our own anatomy, going there requires a level of self-confidence that I feel like there's lots of ways to get there, but motherhood gives you an opportunity to go there if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Megan. And I 100% agree with that. It was really a big part of my book, The Love Fit Mama Way, because the subtitle, Transforming the Core of Motherhood, was really what I was going for. And this idea where, we can succumb to diet culture and we can succumb to all the pressures we feel when we scroll social media and people have perfect pictures. I mean, really perfect pictures. And it's like life looks perfect and we can go, oh, mine does not, and all these things. But really what I find to be such an essential takeaway to really split you from going that route to choosing this alternate route where it's really more empowering is when you go the route of loving the body and the life that you have. And we spend really an uncountable, if that's a word, amount of hours contemplating that, spending time weighing ourselves or weighing our food or going to this, pushing ourselves and doing all these things. And it's like this thing we're searching for ostensibly is outside of us. It's a destination. It's a want. And what I do with my clients and what we really work on in terms of connecting this piece of self-love and then bringing it to the deeper place of sensual and sexual self-love is really about acceptance. It starts with that acceptance of here we are, this is where I am, this is where my body's at. Am I going to start hooking myself with this notion of how it used to be, those pants I used to fit into, those outfits I used to wear, that confidence I used to have, those runs I used to go on, those blah, 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 these things that we hold on to that, like I say, hook us, and we have this emotional attachment to it. And what I feel is once we can identify that and say, wow, I do have an emotional attachment to my scale, and that, I feel better in my day if I weigh myself and the number is better or whatever. We have these ties. And if we can start to become aware of them and identify them, then we can say, accept, right? We can say, okay, I accept that was the way that I thought of my self-worth before that. I thought I had to look a certain way. I thought I'd dress my kids a certain way. I thought I had to, have this, that, or the other a certain way. And once we can identify that and accept it, immediately we can start to say, okay, I love what is now. I love what is now. And I feel like we hear about this and we talk about it, gratitude journals and be grateful for what you have. But this we still have at an arm's length. We have like this separation. It's like, okay, yeah. Oh, I have a roof over my head. Oh, great. But we are reluctant often to truly look within at the power that we have in our own body that starts with truly loving and accepting ourselves. And, it took me a really long time. It's not like, oh, I'm an expert on this and I never was the other way. It was literally years into, and my husband, him and I, we just celebrated 11 years. We've been together for almost 16 years now. And it was a long time into our relationship that I truly opened up. It was way after I had kids and I was ostensibly comfortable with my body. But again, I never realized that I was distancing myself from loving my own body, even if I was talking the talk, because still I would criticize. I would see myself mirror and I'd go, oh, my eyebrows, I need to get, this, or I have to this, or when my hair, or, one of my things that I've started to talk about publicly now is my breasts. I used to, for the longest time, be very, I would say, uncomfortable because my breasts are very small and I wanted them to be bigger, and I contemplating getting implants, even though I would not ever get implants and there's no judgment there. It's just not something I don't want to have a surgery. But for some reason, I took myself down these rabbit holes of that external, of that visual. And I myself had to go through, a pretty deep healing journey after hurting my back, pushing myself way too hard in fitness and in life, thinking I had to take on the weight of the world, because that is what we do, right? It's like that old way. And so I really wanted to talk about this transforming the core of motherhood in this place that we can start to accept our bodies as they are. We can start to accept the fact that everybody's vulva looks different. Everybody has a beautiful body. Everybody is doing the best they can. If they want, who cares? What are we to judge? Who are we to judge? And stepping back. And I feel like the hardest part of that is our ego. And that was something I had to really, really dive into on my own. And, for me, and in our previous episodes, I've talked a lot about my meditation journey and how being more mindful and being aware has really helped me. And, that's seeped into my clients. But now I'm talking about it from a whole nother perspective. And when it comes to confidence, not only is it around body image, but it's around our sexuality and sensuality, knowing our power of, as a woman, when we make eye contact, when we're walking around, when we have a posture that is upright, when we are smiling. I mean, now we're all wearing masks, but you can tell if someone's smiling behind their mask, right? So it's a different aura that you present when you walk around like that. I mean, for me, I love wearing high heels, even though it sometimes is hard on my body. For short times, I will wear heels. And I love it because I walk in this, very new, different way that I don't walk when I'm in my flip-flops. And I love it because I can embody that. And when I practice embodying that, all of a sudden I can bring that into different areas of my life. And that's really what it is it's an opportunity through this area of confidence and self-love to really bolster all these other areas of our life. One being health, right? Our badass bodies, right? We're feeling good when we have more oxytocin bumping, when we're having orgasms. We are multi-orgasmic as women. We can have, and I do, 5 to 10 orgasms a day. There is nothing to stop us. And when we know that's an opportunity, that's not only going to reduce our stress, it's going to connect us to ourselves more, it's connect us to our partner more. We're going to feel more confident when we go out, or when we get on the phone, or when we do our work, or when we parent, or whatever we're doing. And it's a new way of embodying and connecting with the core of who we are. It's not just about the, like you said, six-pack abs. It's about the core of who you are. And it goes so much deeper.
A quick note from our sponsor, Badass Fuel. 2 years ago, someone asked me what supplements I take to maintain my health, my energy, and my edge. And they were surprised that I only took 4 things consistently. For myself and my patients, there are 4 basics that support at a foundational level nearly every system in our body. In my quest for the highest quality ingredients and the easiest system for consistently incorporating supplementation into my routine, I formulated and manufactured my own line of foundational supplements. My intention with this line was first and foremost quality, but equally important was a system for taking and naming the support that ease the incorporation of supplements into your life. It's trusted for myself and my patients, under the guidance of your own healthcare provider, I'm excited to invite you to check out our foundational product line, Badass Basics. You can learn more or order the products yourself by visiting www.badassfuel.com. And I just want to note too, because you mentioned, like putting on heels and it changes the way you feel. And I really just want to point out, because I know there's butters who are like, see, it's superficial. You're doing a superficial thing, but your language is different. It's not, oh, I look in the mirror and I like what it does to my lower back or my chest or my posture. It's no, I wear them because I feel it from the inside out. So we can have two identical actions that we take as women, but the intention behind why we do those actions truly matters when we're talking about this self-love piece. And I point this out because I don't want anybody to engage in this conversation and be like, oh yeah, like I'm actually, I've got this confidence piece. I've got this taken care of because I do X, Y, and Z. You've got to tap into your intention behind it. And I don't say that from a place of shame for people. I say this because I don't want you to miss out on the opportunity to connect to this real internal confidence, because it's powerful. It's really it's powerful. And you started to talk about this, like you were talking about sensuality and sexuality. And I really want to go there, because I think that, as we're having this conversation, like let's move over there, especially as a source of confidence. Because I think there's a lot of women listening. They're like, I want to want this, like, like so many other things in life. So let's paint a picture of like the grass on the other side of the fence here, because you don't have to go anywhere to start to access some of these things.
Not at all. And I think that big question starts and really just ends with, what do I want? And I think we have a hard time as women, myself included, and my husband and I literally still talk about this on a regular basis, is communication to each other, even our closest person, with what do we want? What do we need to provide us what we want? And sometimes we don't, go there, especially sexually, because we do have so many different shame points or so many expectations, especially with a partner, a longtime partner. It's like, oh, he should know by now, how to get me off, or I should already have done this, or I should know this, or I should love this, or we have all these stories in our heads that we make up, and it's real. It's not just a figment of our imagination. It's our old conditioning. It's our old stories. It's where we came from in terms of what we were taught. And I think there's a huge opportunity out there right now with sexual education. And I'm a huge proponent of us educating ourselves on sexuality, on our bodies. I mean, as a person who has a yoni, which is one of the words I use for vulva, for our whole area down there, our clit, our lips, all that, our area of going into our vagina, because our vagina is the canal and our vulva is the lips and the area around. So as I'm talking about this area, sometimes I refer to as a yoni, which I love, that I learned from Tantra. And I really like this idea because it's sort of a word for sacred space. And I really like that idea. And as we as women can start to see our bodies in general as a sacred space and start to honor them, look at them with not only acceptance, and acceptance is a great first step, but then we get to move on to reverence. We get to look at our own bodies in that mirror or in a picture or in various positions or with our partner or in whatever we want, and just look and say, wow, that is beautiful. And I am turned on by this. I am beautiful. And when we can look at ourselves and really believe that, say that to ourselves and believe it, which I 100% believe is possible for every single one of us, regardless of where we came from, we have this opportunity. And the opportunity begins with us knowing our body. And we often think, oh yeah, my husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend, whoever should know my body. And it's like, okay, but often we don't even know our bodies. And so when we can start to have a practice and play with our own bodies, with not the expectation of I'm going to have 10 orgasms, or even one, it's what does this feel like when I touch here? What does this feel like when my partner is watching me while I touch here? How does that enhance? How does that take away? What happens if while I touch here, my partner is watching me and they touch here? How can that enhance? And so it starts to look at opportunities to play, to add more pleasure, to get to know our bodies, whether it's by ourselves or with a partner or partners. But you start to undo the old conditioning by making it okay. And I talk a lot about safety because for women, this is a huge piece for us to open up enough, to feel safe enough by ourselves, let alone with a partner, to literally physically open up and just be naked or be, vulnerable in that way where all our lives we probably felt judged, be by ourselves or somebody else, and had these expectations we should look or be a different way. And it really is a practice that begins with self-touching and self-looking at, through a mirror or looking down at your body and starting to reprogram those old stories, those old, this doesn't look good enough. Me looking down at my breasts going, oh my God, what are these things? Why did I not get bigger breasts? Like my life, and down that road where I could look and say, wow, this is beautiful. I could touch it. I could feel how good it feels to touch it or to be touched and just lose myself in that moment, because it really is an opportunity to get out of our head and into our bodies. And in our lives, especially as entrepreneurs, as moms, as women, we spend so much time in our heads.
No kidding.
Sensuality, senses, getting into our senses, and then sexuality, getting into our sex, acceptance, touching, feeling, revering. It just feels so good. And we can see where the old messaging is, and we can go face it and say, hey, I'm not going to let you rule me anymore. I'm doing it differently. And it's a real opportunity.
When you started to learn about this, where did you go? Where did you go first? Like, where did you start to explore these ideas? Because I think a lot of women, when they're first wanting to do this, like, okay, I want, like, I'm still interested, but we've got baggage. We've got like teachings from parents. We've got teachings from past partners. We've got like a shit ton of shame from all sorts of places, like, body loving shame, but also like, oh gosh, like, am I allowed to do this? Is this okay? Like, where do we learn to start to have these conversations and have this exploration in a way that actually feels emotionally safe for us?
That is such a good question. And I totally, I looked when I started, I found myself to be very curious. And there's a concept that I find to be a bit of a myth around pregnancy and postpartum, which is like, particularly postpartum, that we lose our libido or that we don't want to have sex or that, and which, while that may be true for some people, and there are definitely hormonal fluctuations around all these time periods, I think as an accepted thing and as society, we joke about, oh yeah, now you're married, you're never gonna have sex again, or oh, you have a kid, you're never gonna have sex again. And it's just these jokes we make that we almost like we become a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way, where we go, oh yeah, I'm just not even going to try, or I'm this. And we fall into these traps, I like to think of them as. And, I too found myself in some traps early on around, just not feeling good in my body and feeling like, oh, I wanted to, feel better, look better, and all the kind of different things. But I realized that it was actually my partner, my husband, who was sort of the gateway for me, because he was very open. He was very accepting. He created so much safety. I mean, I very much, I wasn't vocal about, oh, I don't like my body. I wouldn't look in the mirror and berate myself. And it wasn't like he was hearing me talk about those things, but I still, I pushed myself hard, and he could see. He was just like, just relax, and he made me feel really safe, always made me feel really beautiful all along the way. And I think that was one of the things that opened me up. It wasn't like I felt like I had to change, that he already loved me and wanted to pleasure me, and being around me and being together pleasured him and allowed us to actually experiment in that safe container. And I think for one thing, postpartum is that we as women think, oh my gosh, my partner or my husband or wife wants to have sex again and I'm not ready and they're going to, they're bugging me or they're this, or we have all these kind of things. But I think what our partners often really just want most is to connect with us. And often as a new mom, it's natural for us to be like, okay, oxytocin overload. I have like kids on the boobs all day, like, no thanks, get away. And now like hubby wants to like, get away. So I hear that. I totally understand that. And at the same time, there's a real opportunity for couples or for us as individuals to explore what feels good and energy giving, not more depleting or another thing on the to-do list. And then we can go lean in towards that. Like it doesn't have to be, okay, we have to have sex and I'm worried because I'm feeling like I'm not ready to be penetrated yet and that feels too intense and he's going to be mad because I say no and blah, blah, blah. It can be like a really connected conversation about how can I pleasure you, or how can I, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling these things, and yet I really do want to connect with you. Can we watch porn? Can you masturbate? I'll stand here. I'll lie here. I'll touch your leg. I'll touch, and you have
I might fall asleep.
Idea how. Yeah, exactly. I'll lie on your belly and stare at you. Like they won't care often if you are wanting to connect. And the truth is that men do connect and women too, all of us really through the heart, and our heart is connected to our hands, and our hands are very much often connected to our sex. And we as women can close that loop more often. Men close that loop often, and men are more likely to masturbate. It's more accepted in the culture around men and in the masculine culture. And I think we've accepted as women so many of the masculine things in the world, and yet masturbation is still one of those pieces that we don't tend to explore as energy giving. So just reframing often the whole notion of sex into a little bit of play, into a pleasure, into someone just taking care of you. And I know for me and my husband, once we started talking about what it was that pleasured us, what it was that filled us up, what it was that we needed from these sexual encounters. It wasn't always having an orgasm. It wasn't always ejaculating. It wasn't always, coming 5 times or this or that. It was actually, we realized, what I would think 10 years too late, that we just loved lying there together. And he loved it just as much as me. And I wasn't even willing to ask for it until I realized that, why not? Right? Why not? And I think for me, I've now found so many sex positive, accounts online, so many sex educators. I interview on my podcast so many incredible sex educators and sex relationship coaches that are really normalizing this connection and this power and energy giving opportunity that we have that was, or it really still is for many of us, hidden away in this sort of shame-filled domain, as you mentioned.
And what I'm hearing from this whole conversation, and I will just throw in there too, you mentioned all of these like great Instagram accounts, and I'm going to grab those from you. We're going to put them in our show notes so people have a place to start. Because sometimes it just starts by observing, right? Like normalizing, like hearing people use language. But the other thing I heard you really say is it actually just starts with a conversation with your partner about what each of you wants. And I think for a lot of people, that in and of itself is going to like put us to that's going to challenge people right there. Just having that conversation. So many of us have been in patterns where we don't talk, or we just assume, or we don't want to share what we're each at. Like I feel like for a lot of people, that level 1 is going to be a huge opening of intimacy in terms of their relationships. Have you seen that? Do you observe that as well when you're working with clients? It's a powerful thing, right?
100%. It so is. And I think when we can really connect that piece, it gets us to that next place, right? We all have fantasies. We all have desires. Just because we get married doesn't mean we never look at another human and aren't turned on or wonder what it'd be like or have a fantasy about someone else. And if we don't normalize those things and normalize that we each have urges and desires and needs, needs and communicate that to our partner so that they can provide that or we can provide that for ourselves, we really are doing ourselves a disservice. And I know for me, I worked at home for years by myself, and I, had a self-pleasure practice that would really give me a lot of energy, right? And I never communicated that with my partner for a long time. I felt like, oh, that should be my private thing. And would that be weird? And maybe he'll think, oh my God, why is she, masturbating when I want to have sex later? And all these stories, like you said. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is that that's a real scarcity mindset, right? And when we talk about abundant mindset, we talk about how can we have more sex, have more pleasure. And one of the things that, I learned from one of our fave people, Ben Greenfield, is how different delaying of especially male ejaculation can really enhance vitality for the man, can enhance different hormone cascades within their body to have better sex, even if they're not ejaculating and orgasming. We as women, again, can be multi-orgasmic, and our man can last longer. We can go days with him not ejaculating, saving this energy source that is his semen within him. And it is not only anti-aging for him, but amazing for our sex life. And I think these are things that we don't talk about enough. Like, that's a hack. That's amazing.
That's a hack.
My husband loves going days without coming. Yeah, he loves going days without coming. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to come. And, I'm excited for, we'll have time later and we'll this. And it just keeps us kind of like always in foreplay. And it's so much more fun. And, once I started opening up about my own pleasure and what I loved and what I wanted and what I needed and what else we could do and what fantasies I had and what he had, we started to connect on such a deeper level that enhanced our life, yes, but also our individual lives, like our own particular work, our own confidence being our own selves with our friends or with other people. It infiltrates deep into who we are when we are what one of my mentors, Kim Anami, calls a well-fucked woman. And that is something that we can be without having a partner. We don't have to wait for someone else to give us this. We can be a well-fucked woman on our own. And it's a mindset. It's a, connection with our own body. It's an embodiment. It's a giving yourself the pleasure that you desire. And it really starts with understanding what that pleasure that you desire is, and then asking for it from yourself and from your partner or partners.
I love this. There's so much to unpack here. And even as you're talking about, Ben Greenfield and this hack, I was like, also Chinese medicine for the last 5,000 years has talked about these concepts that when men don't ejaculate and when men don't release semen, that this is one of the things that preserves the life force. And for women, it's not the same. So women having an orgasm is not something that is depleting of the life force. It's giving of the life force. What depletes women's life force in Chinese medicine is like giving birth every 9 months. So this idea of, sex can serve a purpose, and I'm not going to delve into religiosity right here. I'm only going to talk about it physiologically. Sex can serve a purpose beyond procreation. There are systems of medicine and systems of medicine that transcend the energetics really well, that have observed this for literally hundreds, if not thousands of years. So, this is a topic that I'm so excited to bring to the surface and for us to lean into, because it's a powerful component of confidence as women. It's a powerful component of what we can bring to the table as contributing members of society, as entrepreneurs, just as powerful people connecting to this element of ourselves. Just as everyone likes to talk about meditation as a hack, I want to start to talk about sexuality as a hack. I want to talk about connecting to self as a hack in a totally different way. So for all those people out there who are like, oh, meditation's not for me, maybe we've got a new avenue here. Maybe we've got something that would be a little bit more your flavor. Okay, Jen, we could do this all day long. But at some point, we have to transition the interview to our KPIs. So this is the portion of the interview where we get to know a little bit about you, some insight in terms of who you are and who you're up to. And I have to say, you've already given us that. So for some people, this might be a little bit of a letdown. But if you will indulge me, I've got some rapid fire questions coming your way. You ready?
All right, let's do it. Yes.
What's the most impactful book or learning that you have had access to during the pandemic?
Ooh. I have to say The Art of Sexual Magic by Margot Anand. She's amazing. And she talks about this connection, what I've been talking about, a lot of this. I mean, she's a brilliant woman, and that's a great book, The Art of Sexual Magic.
Show notes. It'll be in the show notes, everyone. What's the one thing you're most consistent with respect to your health?
Ooh. I got to say my orgasms, definitely.
We have never had that answer, and never before have I smiled the way I am smiling. And I'm just so glad you weren't like drinking water, which is fine. But given the conversation today, you're on brand, my friend. What is something totally badass about you that people would not otherwise know?
Ooh, good question. Something badass that people would otherwise not know. I had my second baby at home with a labor of about 30 minutes and popped her out. And my midwives showed up about 15 minutes before. My husband showed up about 5 minutes before, and I popped her out, and I was hanging out in my bed. And I had such an experience, a beautiful birth experience that, I truly don't share that much of because I found it was hard for me to share for a long time. So I really, most people, when they hear about it, they're like, wow, that's pretty badass.
It is pretty badass. And good thing no one listens to the podcast. So you're good. Your secret's safe with me. I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that story. And, again, we haven't had anyone bring up their birth story or giving birth as one of the things that's totally badass, but it is. It's like, it really is one of those things that is just so transforming. I will also throw in, as someone who's played basketball with you for like 25 years now, your jump shot is pretty badass as well. So we can't let this interview go by without us at least making reference to that. What do you do for fun or play outside the bedroom?
You nailed it. That is my thing. Playing basketball. We built a court at our new house down here in Palm Desert, and that's been one of the things that my husband and I have loved the most is playing basketball, shooting hoops every day with our daughters, and just having fun outdoors together.
And finally, entrepreneurism. Are we born this way, or do we learn to become entrepreneurs?
I think we can learn to become entrepreneurs. We have to have that risk-taking behavior, though, I think, as a thing. And I actually think that can also be taught, because I think we are all have the potential for anything through neuroplasticity and the desire. If we want it, it can happen.
I love it. A perfect way to end the interview. Jen Oliver, it was a pleasure having you. Where can we send people to learn a little bit more about what you are up to? And I know you've got something pretty awesome for this audience as well. Absolutely. You can head over to jenoliver.com. You can head over to the FitMama Podcast, where, like I said, I have a whole bunch of great interviews. My YouTube channel, Love FitMama. And I have a free download I'm going to include in the show notes with Megan. And that is how to worship your man. And it's a little bit of cock worship, which can go for a man or woman. I do have some, like, a little bit of visuals. They're crystals, not real cocks or no real men. But it's an opportunity to tap into a little piece. I've gotten a lot of great feedback, and sometimes it's a little scary, but it's fun. So check it out. Amazing. Jen, thank you so much for being here. A pleasure as always. Thank you, Megan, so much. I appreciate you. The Entrepology podcast is about leveling up your mindset, your health, and your business so you can maximize your impact in this world. To that end, we're going to begin with a new series of offerings to help you have that impact you've always dreamed of. Over on the Entrepology podcast page, we're going to start doing live broadcasts of episodes. Sometimes these will be solo episodes, and sometimes these will be with guests. This is your opportunity to interact with us live as we are recording your favorite episodes. Adjacent to our Facebook page, we also have the Entrepology Collective, a free Facebook group with hundreds of fellow entrepreneurs just like you. In the Entrepology Collective, we're going to keep you up to date on upcoming masterclasses, interact daily, as well as have new offerings like our Badass Book Club. After a 2-year hiatus, we are bringing it back. Our new April and May selections are going to be announced in the coming weeks, and we would love for you to participate in all of these new virtual offerings. I believe that when people have their health, they can change the world. That is what inspired us to start this podcast in the first place. And that is what is inspiring us to keep going. I'm so appreciative of all of you. Give us a like over on Apple iTunes and come and join us in the collective. We'll see